The presentation will revolve around several social issues by starting with the idea that youth policy is a very dynamic field on the move, with many stakeholders claiming a say and with an increased pressure to respond to the more recent challenges. Then I will go to the political and social tensions and the conservative tendencies that are increasingly a concern in Europe and in its central and eastern part, the implications of COVID, the war, and its force in shaping and reframing the way we understand the role of the young people and what societies can and should do on their behalf and for their own welfare. And in the end, I will touch upon artificial intelligence and new technologies in a way likely to bring on the table the idea that technology and artificial intelligence is too important to be left to engineers and software developers alone to deal with that. So without claiming expertise on many of these issues, I would rather map some further issues likely to give some food for thought when thinking of youth policy making in Eastern Europe and Eastern Partnership countries. I will start by revising a definition of the young people, given the new dynamics at the global level, but also in our regions. So we usually speak about young people in terms of age, well, where we have a whole layer of historical and institutional traditions and legacies in defining who are the young people. I'm not going to get into this, but just to highlight that age and the location, class, ethnicity, education, disability are usually the ways we look at the young people as a social group. However, what I find important for Eastern Europe and Eastern Partnership countries is to conceptualize these distinctions in ways that are able to reflect the complexity, the social complexity of our region. And I would just spot the classical divide, urban versus rural young people living in urban or in rural areas. We know too well that we speak rather in terms of degrees of urbanization, not in fixed boxes that reflect young people in rural and in urban areas. We have a large spectrum of residential modes. We have small towns, we have small cities alongside hopefully metropolitan areas likely to resemble the Western concept of what is an urban space. So I would very much encourage rethinking of the youth policy processes from Eastern Europe in ways that incorporate the large array of residential possibilities, and to put on the conceptual map of youth policy making processes the degrees of urbanization rather than these dichotomic views that are not realistic enough, I would tend to say. On another point, we have face a crisis of representation in terms of young people at the European scale. Increasingly, youth organizations are becoming aware of the moral legitimacy of speaking on behalf of the young people and the issues related to privilege, to creaming, when young people as a group are being conceptualized. Increasingly, we need culturally competent ways of reaching the young people that are usually not involved in youth organizations, who are not organized, not in the idea of organizing, because organizing and involving young people in youth organizations should remain an option. We are very keen on enabling young people to make choices, but we need to reflect in which ways our policies are shaped by the absence of some groups. How is the absence of some groups making our youth policies the way we are, the way they are, sorry. Of course, how young people are seen by those making policies at the local, regional, national, European level does matter. Are the young people seen as problems to be fixed or controlled? Is there any moral panic around the young people as a social group? Are they seen as future? Do they matter because one day they will pay our pensions or ensure the economic sustainability of our societies? Or are they a resource? And for whom are the young people a resource? Or are the young people a social group in its own right who deserves to be happy because they are living now and here? These are all ideological or shaping an ethos likely to feed into the policy processes that can have a regulatory approach or an emancipatory one that can be proactive or reactive. However, the way of seeing policies as prevention-oriented or intervention may also be dependent on the issue, the policy issue to be tackled, rather than to be a characteristic of the policy making process in a country or in at the local level. And I would dare to launch some questions to reflect on what are the cultural regimes of the young people that are at play in our countries. And this we may come to this later at the discussion stage. The aim of policy making in the youth field is to create conditions for learning, for opportunity, for experience. Usually policy making is being concerned with education, housing, employment, civic participation, and health. However, there are several challenges that youth policy making has, unlike other policy making sectors. Of course, for any policy, we need powerful states, in the sense of states that are able to offer, to provide administrative capacity, have political commitment and budgets. And I would encourage you to look on the tax revenue losses that are present in the budgets of the countries from Eastern Europe and Eastern Partnership. And we might see that as long as the budgets are not strong enough, it is very difficult for policy making in the youth field, which is marginal in the overall policy landscape, to have proper budget and proper resources allocated. Another issue is that youth policy making has a very elusive, marginal, and always negotiated institutional home. There are often youth ministries and or youth ombudsmans. However, the reason I'm bringing this in is also to highlight that youth mainstreaming, which is so often an issue gaining currency in policy environments, might not have the same policy destiny as gender mainstreaming. Why? Because there is a lower possibility for youth ministries, already marginal, if at all, to exert some influence and to have some oversight of what is going on in terms of young people in other ministries. So this scope of youth mainstreaming is overly ambitious, it might be unrealistic, and it's definitely very hard to be monitored and to be evaluated. And to add to complexity, we do have short institutional memory in youth organizations. This is something structurally as a characteristic of the youth sector, always being in a stage of building up capacities. So with all these elements in mind, we might look at the youth policy making in terms of the classic areas where young people are more likely to be situated, like education, employment, health, housing, and civic participation. However, increasingly, young people claim a say in climate and energy, environmental issues, social justice, countering corruption, which is increasingly a concern for the young people of Eastern Europe and Eastern Partnership, artificial intelligence, and so on. These are the findings recently emerging in the symposium that the Youth Partnership organized last year in Tirana, and I'm drawing to those findings in order to make a claim that the youth policy makers should make other sectors aware they do youth policy. So we need to extend the agenda of what youth policy means, but there are also there is also a need to interrogate the policy discourses of our times. And I gave you just a few examples of the discourse on more jobs, youth guarantees, and Howard Williamson was very strongly against considering youth guarantees as a solution for improving young people's labor market positions. The universal basic income, these are all policies that need to be looked at because the chances are that they don't tackle the underlying circumstances that make young people plastered, for instance, in labor market sectors that are prone to precarization. So it matters to rethink the extent, for instance, youth work is complicit in subjecting young people as economic agents with its focus on employability and skills. So these are some of the ideas that we need to come back and to see to what extent youth work is reproducing some of the normative discourses that are in a way problematic. Some of the political and social tensions of our time, and I'm not going to delve into a dystopic vision of where young people and our world is nowadays. Just a brief word on the recent decision of the World Economic Forum in Davos, which named the 2023 the year of polycrisis. So the effect, the not cumulative effect, but the exponential effect of multiple crises from climate, energy, to revived Russian militarism, social unrest, financial insecurity, food insecurity, and so on. The question is, to what extent young people are part of this global conversation on climate, for instance? Is there anything else going on in our region? Because, for instance, Fridays for Future have not been at the very core of young people's preoccupations, apparently. However, there is a different profile of such concerns in Eastern Europe, and I would very much encourage you to consider, for instance, young people's preoccupation with corruption, transparency, political integrity, which is strongly coming from the countries of Eastern Europe and Eastern Partnership. We need to look into these concerns as being legitimate and to reconsider what comes as young people's apathy in relation to environment. They are concerned, for instance, for the Eastern European countries and Eastern Partnership countries becoming, as some authors put it, pollution heavens for companies that are capitalizing and oriented to profit maximization in these areas. We speak about a context where young people gain a low trust in political institutions. They are disengaged from the classical political roots. It's a decline in their trust. There are illiberal trends gaining increased currency, and also grassroots organizations having hard times in navigating illiberal environments. We have donor-driven agendas that are shaping the civil sector in the countries where the small-scale grassroots organizations are less able to navigate complex environments. There are many organizations that are losing up in the civic actions, or they are turning to service provision as an alternative, which on the long term is likely to bring democratic implications in the sense of mission drift. Organizations increasingly turning to service provision as an expectation they respond to, however, with strong costs for our democracy, as Thomas Dejelan recently stated in several publications. Another question, given the illiberal trends and far-right youth movements in countries of Europe, would be what types of activisms are countries from Central Eastern Europe, Eastern Partnership willing to accept? This is a question that Tommy Kilakowski launched a couple of years ago, and it's increasingly coming as a legitimate issue to reflect on. It's a difficult conversation we need to engage in. In terms of the conservative tendencies, well, each country has its own mixture of conservative tendencies, from misogyny, racism, anti-Gypsyism, and other forms of intolerance. Recently, Romanian Orthodox Church, together with 12 other cults, made a formal claim for the Ministry of Education to revise the education law in order to exclude the concept of diversity alongside many other contentious issues such as gender, and sexual education, sexual orientation as ground for discrimination. This came unexpectedly, but after a COVID period which strengthened the conservative values and brought into light the powerful normative force of patriarchal values. Also in a country where 10% of the birth, the newborn, are being delivered by mothers below the age of 18. Many other countries from Eastern Europe and Eastern Partnerships countries are ranking high on such statistics. We have to ask, what are the cultural traditions that are part of our societies, and how this uneasy relationship between culture and youth policy is being negotiated in our policy processes. As for the COVID, I will not speak about the usual issues that have very much shaped our understanding of what COVID meant for the young people. A single point I would love to highlight is that health transitions have been for a long time having a very low profile when we thought about young people. Although there was an increased awareness that young people are going from for a good health to a poorer health. So they have health outcomes that are lower than the generation of their parents, for instance. Well, we might consider that given the COVID, we have a window to open up a conversation about health transitions in a way that touch upon mental health, but also other important health outcomes in our regions, from obesity to communicable diseases and so on. There is a lot going on, and this conversation has now the potential to be closer to the policy agenda. In relation to the youth sector, an important implication is the orientation, the trade-off from watchdog and activism to service provision as a response to the recovery agendas of different kinds, and also an important implication in relation to a rather diluted understanding of disadvantage. Disadvantage means different things, and the idea that we are all disadvantaged in some way is gaining currency, while some young people are structurally positioned in situations that deserve closer attention. So there is intersectional discrimination and increasing vulnerability of some groups. I feel a moral obligation to speak about the influence of war, but on the other hand, I find this problematic for a person that is rather marginal in some way, because I have the whole respect for the youth workers involved now in continuing their projects or in navigating very stressful and complex environments in Ukraine. I'm just trying to have a glimpse on the implications of war on the youth sector, and try to think in terms of the very long-term implications of the war, in the sense of having the children of those fighting today entering the youth age in a couple of years. The expectation for the youth sector to deal with the trauma that has been the collective and the personal trauma that came after and during the war. And the war is a generational and intergenerational experience for which the countries that are involved are less resourceful in the sense of having the expertise, the financial budgets attached. We have countries without a history of being involved in humanitarian aid of this kind, now in the position of trying to make ends meet, to learn on the go, and to try to accommodate humanitarian and emergency need with a long-term approach on building up resilience. However, I find it problematic to consider an either-or approach, like celebrating young people's resilience and victimization. We need to embrace a complexity of ways young people engage in these situations, and for the youth sector to resist, on the other hand, the propaganda and the normalization of war as time goes along. A very last comment, if you allow me an extra minute, on the artificial intelligence and the new tech. Whilst not claiming expertise myself, I dare to encourage youth workers to, in an age of delegating responsibility for highly specialized issue to specialists, to engage, to make an effort to engage in the current debates related to the artificial intelligence, which is too important to be left for the technical experts to deal with. Our societies tend to see technology and artificial intelligence in a deterministic way, in a deterministic fashion, like, well, artificial intelligence is a thing out there, the robots are coming, stealing the jobs, and so on. However, the way we interact and the relationship our societies have with technology and artificial intelligence is mediated by policymaking processes. However, the policymaking is lagging behind technology, so we have to put pressure on our governments to hold big tech companies accountable, to increase transparency and ethics. This emerged as a concern for the young people, and I think that building up this kind of pressure and engaging in the hard conversations of what are the implications of artificial intelligence and how it can be used for humanistic and new ways of conceptualizing human rights and dignity, I find it very important. Also, one more thing on the appealing side of technology in the social field. Yes, technology might increase the capacity of what we do in the social area. However, conceptualizing technology, yet another app, as a solution for complex social issues might be far from a solution. I would very much encourage you to reflect on the potentials and the disadvantages of relying to technology as a substitute for physical interactions, for example. Thank you very much